In this video, we're going to continue looking at graphing quadratic functions, and we're going to look at just a couple more ways that we can work with those functions. So we know that the graph of a quadratic function is a parabola. And if that quadratic function is written in the form of f of x equals a times x minus h squared plus k, it's pretty easy for us to pull out that vertex because we just use the values h and k, and that gives us the vertex hk. We can use that to graph the parabola, and from there it's pretty simple. But sometimes we don't have it in that form. But since we can find out a lot about a quadratic function before we ever graph it, it's usually in our best interest to get that quadratic into an appropriate form so we can find out that information. If you wanted to do that, we would use a technique similar to completing the square. But what we're going to look at is how to find the vertex using a formula where if we have the graph in this standard form of f of x equals ax squared plus bx plus c, we can use this formula that tells us that the vertex can be found by negative b over 2a. That's going to give us our x value of the vertex. Then, to get the y value of the vertex, we would take that and plug it back into our function. So that's just saying that that's the function value at that x. So our x, we would take it and plug it back into the function to get the y value. And that would give us our vertex. If we're asked to find a maximum or a minimum value, then the quadratic function, if it's a parabola and it's opening upward, it's going to have a minimum value. So if our parabola opens upward, it's got that minimum value. If the parabola opens downward, then it's going to have a maximum value. Those values are going to be where the maximum or the minimum occur. And so if we're trying to find the max or the minimum, we can use the vertex, but specifically, we want to use the y value of the vertex. So when we're finding a minimum or a maximum, if it opens up, it's going to be a minimum. If it opens down, it's going to be a maximum. We're going to find the vertex, but we want to make sure that in that vertex, we have an x and we have a y. The actual maximum or minimum, that value is going to be right here at the y. So the max or min value. And this is going to be important when we look at some word problems, because if it asks you, what's the maximum height or the minimum height? Those kinds of things, those are going to be the y values. Sometimes you will want to find the x, so you have to pay attention to what the question is actually asking you. But remember that the minimum and the maximum are actually the y values. They occur at the x values. So let's look at an example where we actually have to graph this one. So we're going to start out by finding our vertex, and we're going to do that using that formula. So remember, our vertex, the x value of our vertex is going to be found using negative b over 2a. So that's the first thing we want to do. And we're going to get that b and a value from this function. So right here, the a value is going to be the value in front of x squared. And since you don't see 1 there, the a is an understood 1. The b value is going to be the number in front of x, so that's negative 2. The c value is the value back here that does not have a variable. Now, we won't actually use the c value right now, but I did want to point out how to find those. So what we're going to do is we're going to first find our x value for our vertex. So I'm going to plug that in. So negative b over 2 times a. And then we're going to clean that up. So that gives me a positive 2 over 2. So I get 1. So remember, that's the x value of my vertex. So I know the x. Now to find the y, I'm going to take this and I'm going to plug it into my function. So I'm going to find f of 1. So 1 squared minus 2 times 1 plus 9. And then I'm going to calculate that, and it gives me 8. So that means that my vertex is 1, 8. My axis of symmetry is always the x value of my vertex. So x equals 1. Since my first term here is positive, that means it's going to open up. So when I graph this, I'm going to start by graphing 1, 8. I know it opens up. I just need to get some more points. So again, you could do that by hand. We can also go and use our calculator. So we would graph this the same way we did before. We would go to y equals x squared minus 2x plus 9. Again, I can look at the graph. I can see that my vertex is at 1, 8. It does open up. I can get points from my table. Second graph. Gonna get points that are around my vertex. So on this one, I'm gonna graph 2, 9, 0, 9, and that is about enough to get kind of an idea of what it would look like. Okay. All right, so now we'll do another one. So first thing we're going to do, again, start out by finding our vertex. So I'm going to pull out my values. So my A, this time I have a negative in front of that. That means that that's a negative 1. B, it's a value here, so negative 2. Again, I don't really need C, but I'm going to show you. That would be 8. So if I find my x of my vertex, it's going to be negative b, so negative 2 over 2a, and I'm going to simplify that. So I've got a positive 2 over negative 2, which simplifies to negative 1. So for my vertex, now I know the x value is negative 1. To find the y, I'm going to plug that in. So f of negative 1, I've got negative 1 squared. So there's a lot of negatives, so be careful there. 2 times negative 1 plus 8. And you can use your calculator to do this. Just be careful with your negatives. So I'm going to do negative 1 squared minus 2 times negative 1 plus 8. And so that gives me a y value of 9. My axis of symmetry, x equals negative 1. And since that first value is negative, that means it's going to open down. So I can go to y equals, I can graph this and get my table of values. So second graph, I want values around my vertex. So I can come over here now and I can graph these. So negative 1, 9, 0, 8, negative 2, 8, 5, And that's pretty good. Gives me an idea. And there we go. Okay. Right. So here, another one. We've got our x value, our a value, sorry, which is 1, b, which is 6, and c, which is 8. So to find our x value of our vertex, we're going to have a negative b over 2 times a. So that gives me a negative 6 over 2, which is negative 3. And remember, to get the y value, I'm going to plug that in. So f of negative 3, I've got negative 3 squared plus 6 times negative 3 plus 8. Again, you're welcome to use your calculator for that. So negative 3 squared plus 6 times negative 3 plus 8. So I get negative 1. So my vertex is negative 3, negative 1. My axis is symmetry. X equals negative 3. Since the first term is positive, it opens up. And then we can use our calculator to graph it and get some more points. So x squared plus 6x plus 8. The second graph, I'm going to go find my vertex because I want points around that. So negative 3, negative 1. Negative 4, 0. Negative 2, 0. And you can get as many points as you want until you feel comfortable enough to sketch that out. Okay, let's do one more. So here we've got our a value, which is negative 1, our b value, which is 2, and our c value, which is not there. That means it's 0. So x equals negative b over 2a. So I got negative 2 over negative 2, which is 1. Then to get my y value, I'm going to find f of 1. So negative 1 squared plus 2 times 1. And that just gives me 1. So my vertex is 1, 1. My axis is symmetry. X equals 1. And since that first term is negative, this one opens down. Okay, then we can go to our calculator and we can graph it. So negative x squared plus 2x. I'm going to go to my table. I want to find my vertex, so let's go back to 1, 1. I'm going to graph that one first, then get some points around it. And oh, that did not work out well. Let's try that one more time. That's a little bit better. Sometimes these are hard to graph. And that is graphing quadratics. So now let's look at some more problems. So this one says your company uses a quadratic model, and so they give us the equation, give us the function, to represent how many units y. So it's really important to pay attention to what each variable is. So y is the number of units of a new product that will be sold. X is the number of weeks after its release. The question says, how many units can you expect to sell in week 28? So they give us a function, they give us a value, we're going to plug that in. So our function, y equals negative 11x squared plus 350x, and then they give us this value of 28. And so it says 28, and that's week 28. So if we look here, x is the number of weeks. That means that x is our 28. So I'm going to plug that in. Oh, and I did not write my x there. Sorry. You guys see that. I missed that x. Okay. And then I can go to my calculator. I can plug all that in. So negative 11 times 28 squared plus 350 times 28. And that gives me 1,176 for my y. And that represents the number of units because it says how many units? Y. So 1,176 units. Okay. This one says find two numbers whose sum is 54 and whose product is as large as possible. Hint, let x and 54 minus x be the two numbers. Their product can be described by the function f of x equals x times 54 minus x. Okay, so they give us the function and it wants to know what the product is as large as possible. So that's one of those key things that says, hey, I want to get a maximum. So if we graph this, go to y equals, and let's graph this, x times 54 minus x. And let's look at it. It's hard to see, right? So we could zoom out. So if you press zoom 3 and then enter. Yeah. Zoom 3. Okay. You might have to do it a couple of times. All right. So now we can see our graph. So you may have to press zoom 3. On your calculator, you should just be able to press zoom 3, enter, and hit enter more than one time, and it should continue zooming. So we can see that our function looks like this, which is what we would expect. Because if we were to clean this up and distribute that x, we would get 54x minus x squared. And you can see that the x squared term is negative, so that should open down, which means this is our vertex, which is our maximum, which is exactly what we want, okay? And we want to find the numbers, and the numbers are the x value. So what we're looking for is the x of the vertex. So the first thing you want to do on these kinds of problems is figure out what you're trying to find, right? What do you know? What does it stand for? And what are you trying to find? So we just need to find the vertex. So we could do that since we have it in this form now. We can find our vertex formula. So I'm going to rewrite this because I like for it to be in order. So negative x squared plus 54x, because now I can find my A is -1 and my B is 54. And if I use my vertex formula, x equals -b over 2a. And if I simplify that, I get -54 over -2, which is 27. And so that's one of the numbers. It wants to know two numbers. So the first number is 27. The second number can be found by doing 54 minus x. Well, 54 minus 27 is also 27. So my numbers are 27 and 27. Okay, so let's look at this one. The length of a rectangle is 3 inches more than the width. The area of the rectangle is 270 inches. Find the width of the rectangle. So you've got a rectangle. It says the length is 3 inches more than the width. So that means that the length could be written as 3 inches more than the width. This is the width. Then the area is 270. So if I use my area formula, I know area is length times width. So if 270 is equal to the length, which is W plus 3, times the width, which is W, I could clean this up, distribute that through, and get 270 is equal to W squared plus 3W. And what it's asking me to find, it says find the width of the rectangle. So I'm just trying to find W. Okay, that means I just need to solve this quadratic. Well, I can do that by setting it equal to 0. Anytime you're trying to solve a quadratic, we're going to set it equal to 0. So that means that I need to take this and subtract it over. So 0 equals W squared plus 3W minus 270. Now I'm going to try to factor this. So remember, when we're factoring it, we're trying to find numbers that multiply to that last number, so -270, and add to that middle number, so they need to multiply to 3. And so remember, this is just trial and error. You're just trying all the numbers that multiply to -270, and I know it's a big number, so it may take you a little while, but try your numbers. So this one ends up being -15 and +18, because when you add those together, you get +3. So then this factors into W minus 15 and W plus 18. So then we can set these equal to 0. And so W equals 15, or W equals -18. Now, width can't be negative, which means that can't be an answer. So the answer is 15, and the units would be inches. Okay. All right, number 4. An arrow is fired into the air with an initial velocity of 64 feet per second. The height in feet of the arrow, t seconds after it was shot into the air, is given by the function h of t equals -16t squared plus 64t. Find the maximum height of the arrow. So the height is what it's equal to. T is the seconds. So T is time. If I'm trying to find the maximum height, that means that I want to find the vertex, specifically the y value. Now, this function is negative, which means it's going to open downward, which means it will have a maximum. I just need to find the y value. So I'm going to start by finding my vertex. So A is negative 16. B is 64. So x equals negative b over 2a, which would simplify to negative 64 over negative 32, which would simplify to 2. So that means that the time the maximum occurs is 2 seconds. But I need to know the height. So I'm going to take that and plug it back in. I'm going to find h of 2. That's the height at 2 seconds. So negative 16 times 2 squared plus 64 times 2. You can plug that into our calculator. And so h of 2 is equal to 64. It's the height in feet, so 64 feet. Okay. This one says an object is shot vertically upward. Its height, h, in feet after time, t, in seconds, may be expressed by the formula h of equals 96t plus 16t squared. When will the object be 100 feet in the air? So when is a time. That means we're trying to find time. So h is height, that's 100. I'm trying to find t. So I've got a quadratic. I'm going to set it equal to 0. This needs to be subtracted. I also want to put this in order. So negative 16 t squared plus 96t minus 100. Now, this one does not look like it's that easy to try to factor, even if it could be factored. So remember, another option to solve a quadratic besides factoring is the quadratic formula. So remember the quadratic formula, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So we can also use that. So x, in this case, it's t, right? So t equals negative b. So b is 96, so negative 96 plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. And then we just clean that up. So I'm going to start out, get the calculator back. I'm going to start out by putting the inside of that in my square, or in my calculator. So I'm going to do 96 squared minus 4 times negative 16 times negative 100. And so now I've got negative 96 plus or minus the square root of 2,816 over negative 32. And remember that plus or minus means it's two answers. So I've got t equals negative 96 plus the square root of 2,816 over negative 32. And t equals negative 96 minus the square root. And so now I can get my two answers. So I'm going to go in here. I like to use the fraction, so alpha, and then x will give you the fraction. So negative 96 plus the square root of 2816 over negative 32. So that means that this one is 1.34, and it was seconds. So that could be one answer. Because if it goes up, it's going to come back down, right? So the first time it hit was 1.34 seconds. Now let's do it again. So negative 96 minus the square root of 2816 over negative 32. And I get 4.66 seconds. So that was the second time that it hit 100 feet. Okay. All right. Last one. The cost in millions of dollars for a company to manufacture X thousand automobiles is given by the function C of X. Find the number of automobiles that must be produced to minimize the cost. So that means that I'm trying to find the vertex. So this is a positive A value, so it opens up. I need to find my vertex. And it wants to know, find the number of automobiles. Well, that is my X. So I need to find the X value of my vertex. Okay, because I'm trying to minimize the cost. So X equals negative B, so negative 30 over 2 times A, so 30 over 6, so I get 5. Now, it says X thousand. That means 5,000 automobiles.